Yeah, g'day and welcome to the Two Jacks as part of your Patreon service for the Conditional Release program. And I am here today with Hong Kong Jack. G'day, Hong Kong Jack.
G'day, Jack. How are you?
Yes, and I'm Jack the Insider. I'm very well, thank you. And I know you're very well. We've been having a bit of a chat before we started. How are things in Hong Kong with COVID? There's been a bit of a balls up in the quarantine, hasn't there?
There has. You know, Hong Kong used to be known, amongst other things, to Disneyland for grown-ups and the bit of Asia where everything worked. But it's not really working well at the moment.
Not working, no.
The Penny Bay Quarantine Centre, which will never end up being a five-star resort, it's been a complete shambles. We've had people having no food for a day, no power, no mobile phone, and some of them being kept extra days because, well, we can't find your paperwork. You know,
that does sound. It's got a bit of the Long Bays about it, Jack. Got a bit of the Long Bay jail around it.
Yeah,
and that's not the way it's supposed to be. We've got incoming. No. We've got incoming travellers, and one or two people have been pulled up for COVID infection in Hong Kong, and that's where they end up in Penny Bay,
they do.
And essentially in Dongas.
Yeah, in Dongas. Anyway, that's sort of caused a fair bit of amusement round town, as has the decision to cull 2,000 hamsters.
I read this, yes. This is seems to be a bit rough on hamsters. There's one particular pet shop where a bloke got COVID and then they went in and tested some hamsters and some of them had COVID too.
Yes, and they can't work out whether the bloke gave the hamsters COVID or the hamsters gave the bloke COVID. So they decided to cull a couple of thousand hamsters and other small pets.
Other small rodents, yeah.
Yeah. So that too has caused a great deal of consternation. I mean, look, they had trouble culling the feral pigs that are all over Hong Kong because the animal rights people don't like that. So culling 2,000 hamsters, little people's pets, is not very popular.
Not very popular, I would imagine. Tough time to be a hamster in Hong Kong.
It is. Yes, but while we're on COVID, I had the news on last night, and just for a second or two there, I was beginning to wonder, the Aussie news, I was beginning to wonder whether Mark McGowan's dad was a flashingly good golfer and his dad invented the burrito as well.
Look, I have been critical of McGowan. There are some peculiar issues about Western Australia. Issues, I might say, that should have been solved by government, including his. But their health service is not in good shape. No. And so they have that to consider. It's a reasonably large city, not as big as Sydney and Melbourne, of course, bigger than Adelaide. But the population densities are quite the same as Sydney and Melbourne, and they've got a public transport system that relies on 3 lines. So essentially, everyone's going on the same train to the same place. So this is actually a bit of a nightmare scenario. On top of the fact that they have hospitals that are, there haven't been enough of them built. In McGowan's time and in his predecessor's time. So there are some peculiar issues there. I know West Australians are quite happy with the way things are, but those problems that they've got, the issue with it is that those problems aren't going to get solved in the next 3 months when they've got to go, when at some point they've got to open up. They're talking about after the third jab reached 80%. Well, they're at 28% now. So it's going to be a fair time before they can talk about opening up. They do have some peculiar issues there that people from the East don't necessarily contemplate, but at the same time, you would think that those issues, as serious as they are, can't be resolved in the space of a month or two in government. Should have been done in the last 10 or 15 years. Not enough hospitals in Perth. That's the problem.
I think he's facing the same problem that all of the zero COVID areas face, which is what do you do about Omicron? And, you know, I don't think we know the answer here. The government's running around trying to maintain its very good test and trace system. But it's easy to see that would be overwhelmed if the numbers are in the numbers you have in Victoria and New South Wales, for instance.
Yeah.
There wouldn't be enough public servants here to do the test and trace in those sort of numbers.
Look, there is really just that issue of just kicking it down the road. Now, what would the benefits be of kicking down the road? Maybe some of the pharmaceutical companies will start to develop antiviral treatments that are more effective than the ones that are in place now.
Pfizer has one of them.
Yeah. So you would expect to see more and more development along that line, along those lines. But other than that, you really do get the sense of you're just delaying what is going to be a pretty awful situation.
Well, here in Hong Kong, if they delay it long enough to get our over 80 vaccination rates up to 60 or 70 or 80%, that would be worthwhile. You know, who knows?
One of those things that we are seeing more and more about Omicron is, that 60-plus age group of infection, where infection becomes very problematic and can lead to hospitalisation.
Thanks for that cheery news.
So it's not the kids. We thought it might be the kids and thought, oh, thank Christ, we're out of it. We're out of it this time. But no,
as a bloke who's 66, I'm really pleased to hear that.
Yeah, it is the case that as you get older, those risks just increase, and so it is with Omicron, as you would expect, to be honest, with pre-existing health conditions and all those sorts of things that you do carry around with age. You and I got one of each. Yeah, one of each. Right. Anyway, look, we want to move on to the UK because Boris is in a bit of trouble. We've been watching this pretty closely. Now, there's a challenge, and the Conservatives, the Tories, they have a process for a leadership challenge, and it's been in place for a long time. Would you like to explain it for me?
Well, there's been various versions of it in place for over the years, but in a nutshell, to get a challenge up, you've got to find 15% of the parliamentary party to sign a letter saying that they have no confidence in the Prime Minister. That number is 54 in the current makeup of the Tory party in Westminster.
That would be about a sixth of the party, or no, not quite as much as that.
15% is required. Now, no one knows whether they've got that or not. And that goes to what they call the 1922 committee, which is really just the parliamentary office bearers. If they get that number of 54, there has to be
there is a spill. Yeah,
there has to be a spill, a no confidence vote of the party room. And if Boris gets 50%, then no one can challenge for 12 months. If he gets less than 50%, that's it.
Yeah, it goes. Obviously. Yeah.
It goes. And then there is a process to choose a new leader. And the way that works is you have a series of votes in the parliamentary party until you whittle the number of candidates down to 2. And then that decision between those two goes to the party generally, not just the parliamentary party, but every member of
every financial member of the party.
Yeah, everyone who's been a member for 3 months at least of the Conservative Party in the UK gets to vote on that, and that takes some little while. In the meantime, the existing Prime Minister, or if he resigns, someone who is appointed by the Queen to replace him, stays as the Prime Minister.
It's a complex process, but the results are the same. And that when you look at these, when they look at the issues of spills anywhere, that if, for example, Boris gets 55% of the party, there's still 45% of them who want him gone, and they will hunt him down. So while he might survive, the next 12 months could be extremely difficult for him.
It could be. In fact, Theresa May got 50% of the vote, a bit over 50% of the vote.
Yeah.
And that entitled her to protection from the rules for 12 months, but she was gone in 6.
Yeah, that's right. And she was looking over her shoulder from that time on, and that's just the way it goes. Now, the plotters are what we call the Red Wall Tories, and it's a very modern term, essentially media contrived, of Tories from the Midlands all the way up to Scotland who hold seats that were where they came to power in the 2019 election, and Labor lost a hell of a lot of those seats that were traditionally theirs, and they call it the Red Wall.
Well, it was called the Red Wall because that was the thing that kept the Labor Party relevant, because they had a whole bunch of seats up there, effectively a wall where they won every time.
Yes, that's right. So Labor is as it is here is the red, and Tories the blue.
Tories the blue.
But the Red Wall broke.
The Red Wall fell. The Red Wall fell because Boris had an appeal to working class Labor voters
Brexit-driven.
But partly Brexit-driven. They wanted Brexit done, and he was the man who got Brexit done. But not just Brexit done. His appeal to the working class voters was greater than the appeal of the Labor Party, the British Labor Party generally, who's sort of abandoned working class voters to a large extent.
But the plotters themselves, known as Red Wall Tories, haven't taken these Labor seats, haven't taken the Red Wall down. They're all on pretty narrow margins, a lot of them.
Yep.
And they are plotting because they are looking even now at 2024 for the next election, thinking that their chances are looking pretty slim under Boris. They are essentially a fairly young group, the plotters themselves, and very, very ambitious. But the issue about their ambition is that it may not come to anything. They sort of sit on the what might be called the blue balsa wood wall, because that's going to come down. That will come down, whether it's Lib Dems or Labor who take those seats, they will come down at the next election in some shape or form.
Well, a lot of them would have anyway, or some of them would have anyway. Yeah. But their only real prospect of being re-elected, and this seems strange when they're plotting to get rid of Boris, but Boris is their best chance to get re-elected, because I can't think of another Tory leader other than Boris who could win those Red Wall seats.
Well, I just looked at some polling in those Red Wall seats, and I think they're saying all but 2 or 3 of them would be wiped out. It's not just
at the moment.
It's not just Labor pickups, and there is an issue about Sir Keir Starmer as the Labor leader, opposition leader, and whether he's cutting through in those areas. But there's certainly a huge amount of dissatisfaction with the Tories in those traditional Labor areas. Yeah,
at the moment. I mean, but the Tories have got some competent people who could replace Boris as Prime Minister and who could shore up the Tory base. But Boris, I think, is probably the only one who can go up there in the Red Wall and actually win seats, because he's got an uncanny ability to connect with people who you wouldn't on the surface you wouldn't think he would be able to.
Yeah, I think there's always a sort of use by date on that sort of thing. With that sort of populism, when you win people over, it's really hard to keep them.
Although John Howard was able to keep the. He won seats in the outer suburbs of Sydney, Melbourne, and Brisbane that Labor had thought were theirs, and he was able to keep a lot of them for 2 or 3 elections. So it is possible.
Oh, and we could talk about the luck he had. He did ride his luck quite a lot there. But yeah, look, we'll just see.
Plenty of luck in politics.
Oh, you definitely need it. And sometimes that luck can come from great big global events that really are beyond the control of the domestic issues and the domestic leaders. But we're going to have to keep an eye on it. Boris, we're not sure yet if the spill will be called. They do have, I do think that it would look very likely that they have the numbers to call a spill, and it just depends on the result then. And then if Boris comes away with just a middling victory, you walk away wounded and you could be hunted down pretty quickly, and it has happened many, many times in politics before.
And right within Cabinet, some of his fellow Cabinet members one of them said last week, it's a question of whether he goes now, whether he goes later.
Yeah.
So there is some.
He may not be a dead man walking, but he has got a bit of a limp.
Yeah, he's certainly got a bit of a limp. He's limping quite badly, but it's people can survive these things in politics. I mean, it's
we'll see.
I mean, most of us would give up. It requires an immense amount of mental toughness to be a politician, because every day you get out of bed and you go to work, and there's going to be people who are just desperate to belittle
wants your job.
Does it?
Wants your job. And do anything to get it.
And do anything to get it. And it doesn't matter which party you're in, that's the truth. I mean, most of us would, facing a day like that, would pull the doona back over our heads and stay there,
Exactly right. But Boris has been through that process himself, of course. He's been the aspirant. And so I don't know that he and Theresa May would be exchanging Christmas cards all that often, would they?
No.
And that's so that's what happens,
So, but even
Boris, the king,
even Boris's supporters are saying, well, people who are very fond of him, and there's plenty of those, are saying perhaps it's all over. So it's going to be interesting to watch, but very hard to pick. I mean,